Hey, good morning. It's Bill Tenny-Brittian with Catalytic Growth Church tip for the week. We're trying this again. We're going to keep doing this until I get it right because, this live stuff is all brand new to me. And hey, what can I say? I want to thank you for joining me this week. We're going to talk about the role of the lead pastor. And since we don't have a whole lot of time, I'm going to jump right in and get started. Let's see. I went with slides this time. We'll see how they work. All right, here we go. Here's a hard reality. Church growth lives or dies based on the pastor's calendar. I guess it's over there. So I got to remember to point the right way. Anyway, if it's based on the pastor's calendar, what you preach is important, and so on. But most pastors say that growth is really important to them. But then if you look at their calendar, you get a glimpse of what is the reality. See, decline doesn't start with your theology. It starts with your time allocation. It starts with deciding where you're going to spend your time, who you're going to invest that time in. It's critical where you spend your time, where you do with your calendar, what you put on that calendar. That's the end all be all of everything for church's growth. The reality is that calendar and how you spend your time is every bit as important and maybe even more important than what you're preaching on Sunday. I'm not sure that's 100% the case, but it is certainly an equal part of a church's growth. I don't care what you preach. If you don't get the word out there to people in the community that you're preaching something that might be life-changing. So how you spend your time, where you spend your time is critical. So if your week is packed with working with your church people, then growth is already stalled out. That's just a sad, sad reality. That church growth isn't a strategy problem by and large. It's a calendar problem. So let's talk about the real problem. Pastors tend to overinvest in church people. We spend our time in meetings. We do Bible studies. We do discipleship training with the great hope. Please hear me. It's a great hope. It's a great ideal that we're trying to get our church members fired up so they will go out and do discipleship, do evangelism, be neighborhood missionaries. But if you've been in that church for any length of time, and if you're not the church pastor, you're probably not the first church pastor to decide that that's the tactic that we're going to take. We're going to get the members to grow the church. We're going to get the members out to transform the community. And the question is, how's that working for you? We can spend a lot of time trying to convince our members to invite people. Let's be clear. They've invited everybody they know several times, but depending on them for evangelism is, like I said, it's a great ideal, but in the practical reality is your church will continue to stagnate and die if you maintain that. We spend time in church administration. We spend time in member care. We do hospital visitation. The pastor spends the majority of their time doing stuff for the members. Growth doesn't come from an internal focus. Never has. Jesus left the 99 to go be with the lost, to get out of the Christian ghetto, if you will, with where all the Christians are, to go spend time with those who are not Christian. And being busy doesn't necessarily mean being effective, and it certainly doesn't mean growing a church. Pastors tend to assume their church growth comes from their sermons or from their programs or from their systems. And although it does come from their systems, depending on what they're doing with their systems, it doesn't, by and large, come from the rest of that. None of those things work if the pastor is invisible to the unchurched people. And the smaller the church is, the more inward the pastor tends to become. An inward drift kills growth every time. So let's talk about the solution. Listen, pastor, where you spend your time seriously matters. And the research is clear and it's unforgiving. In Paul Borden's book, and it's a dated book, but I can assure you things have not changed since pre-COVID. That in fact, things have kind of gotten worse as far as our culture is concerned. Research is clear and unforgiving that growing church pastors spend a disproportionate time with unchurched people rather than on outreach programs. They spend more time out and about with folks than they do with programs, with sermon preparation, with all of those things that we tend to spend our time with. Now, when I talk about being out in the community, we're not talking about random outreach or putting together some sort of an outreach program or doing events. We're talking about just being out there. It's intentional presence in the community, hanging out with or meeting with other influencers in the community. And when I say other influencers, I'm not talking about social media influencers. I'm talking about hanging out with the mayor, hanging out with the school superintendent, hanging out with the principals, hanging out with the chief of police, hanging out with the chamber director, hanging out with people who know people who can network, you can network with and network through. Spending time in the community is not an option. And in fact, one of the things that Paul Borden talks about in his book is one of the most common characteristics of churches that were growing sustainably was that the pastor spent at least 50% of their time out in the community with unchurched people. They were networking. They were having coffee. They were getting to know them. They were building relationships. Depending on the size of your church, really depends on how much time you need to be spending out in the community. Listen, if you're averaging 300 in worship, which is probably not a whole lot of you watching this, to be honest, we mostly work with small membership churches. 50% of your time in the community is normative. That's what it takes to go from 300 to 400, 500, 600, et cetera. Doesn't make a difference how big your church is. 50% or thereabouts is where you need to spend. Now, if your church is under 300, again, probably most of you, if it's between like 150 and say 299, you need to be spending 60% of your time. Now, talk about 60% of your work time. So if you work 40 hours, good luck with that. If you work 40 hours, then 60% of that, what is that? That's 25, 30 hours a week. I guess that's 3/4 time. So 25-ish hours of your time. Okay, my math sucks. You get the idea. You're spending 60% of your time out in the community. If your church is under 150, that number jumps to 80% of your time. If you want to grow your church and you want it to be sustainable, 80% of your time is not sitting in your office. It's not doing member care. It's not doing all those things that most pastors do. It's not playing pastor fetch. It's being out in the community with unchurched people because, pastor, you are the face of the community, of the church in the community. And the consequences of our choices are critical. When we have an outward focus, we build trust in the community. We are building a reputation in the community. We are spending our presence out there because you're the face of the community. Whether you like it or not, you're the face of the community. You're the face of the church in the community. And if you're not out in the community, then your church is very safely parked on the corner of it's all about us and invisible to the community. That's where we are, Pastor, when we, as a pastor, aren't out in the community. It becomes a membership club of just us, and no one knows about us. No one hears about us. We don't have a reputation because we're not out there. No one stops at our church to visit on Sunday morning because they drive by the church year after year, day after day, et cetera. They don't even see us most of the time. And that's a huge problem. Building that reputation is critical. This matters because declining churches don't need more activity. They actually need less. What they really need is you out in the community, building relationships, inviting people to whatever it is you're talking about this Sunday and the next Sunday and the following Sunday that is relevant to their lives. Decline comes from being busy with your members. Momentum and growth comes when pastors are known beyond the church walls and spending time with the unchurched. Listen, here's the reality. The next step is to get registered for the catalytic conversation that we're having this Thursday. We have one every Thursday. Well, almost every Thursday. We didn't do it on Thanksgiving, for instance, but we get every Thursday. It's a 1-hour deep dive into this. We'll unpack this whole thing of how the pastor spends their time, the role of the lead pastor in the church. The link is there in the QR code, and I'll put it down in the description as well. I hope to see you there. If you need more than a snapshot, if you want a full framework of networking, how to spend your time, and how to do this without blowing up your church, then you want to be here on Thursday. I'll see you then. I hope this was helpful. Take care. Bye-bye.